of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move the first reading of a bill shortly entitled Companies Amendment.
Companies Amendment.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order number 49-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Proceed, Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move the second reading of a bill shortly entitled Companies Amendment. Madam President, if we take a look at the number of bills we have before the Senate today, we have, as far as amendments are concerned, Madam President, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 amendments. And all of these amendments, Madam President, are kind of, to a large extent, they are connected. My Senator Francis said they are intertwined. And in the interest of time, Madam President, allow me, and grant me the leave, Madam President, to just provide a general overview as to the reasons we are here to make these amendments. I know very well, Madam President, the bill before us currently is that of the Companies Amendment. Companies Amendment. But in the interest of time, I do not want to speak on each of these amendments. Although I will speak of the amendment itself. But I believe that a general overview, more or less a historic perspective, needs to be shared in this House Senate today.
Senator, I have no problem with that position, except that we must remember to deal with each bill separately thereafter.
Thank you very, very much, Madam President. I think that will make life much easier for us here today. So, Madam President, I recall while attending university in the United States in the early 90s, thereabouts. In fact, I went to the US in 92 rather. There was a very, almost a common word, a word that almost found its birth during that period, the 90s especially. And that was a term we refer to today as globalization. The world during that time changed very rapidly. There was, Madam President, more or less an integration of governments, of economies, of markets, of systems, even legislation, Madam President. The world became almost, well, almost one, Madam President, I would say. One global market space. Gone are the times or the days when you had individual markets per se. There was more or less an intertwining, an integration of these individual markets. And of course, Madam President, they were not just transformation, but these were reformations. Quick reformations, Madam President. And this change at the time was advanced mainly by transportation and technology. These two things, Madam President, changed the world. Technology and transportation. The world became smaller, so to speak. The world was more or less one marketplace of buyers and sellers. So the mode of business transition or transaction changed rapidly. And I remember, talking about technology, Madam President, I remember clearly when we had that technology boom in the 90s, late 90s, under the presidency of Clinton. And the pace of development in technology was much faster than the number of people that could be recruited to fill in positions in technology. That was the birth of Silicon Valley, I remember very well. That was the 90s into the early 20s. And the world space became very competitive, Madam President. But something significant happened in the early 90s, early 2000 rather, 2001. A very significant event that changed the world and the way we do business in this world forever. And that event, Madam President, we all know it as the 911 event. It changed the world drastically. We remember it, Madam President, when 4 planes, US, American airline planes, crashed. 2 in the World Trade Center, both. And you had one flying into the Pentagon, and I remember that very vividly, because I remember, Madam President, I was in a classroom, an 8 o'clock classroom teaching at Howard University, and we had to leave the classroom because the Pentagon wasn't too far from Howard University. And there was just fear on campus. All cell phones were dead, no calls could be made. You saw the fumes coming out of the Pentagon. It was a time of fear, and you just feel terrorized. And Madam President, the World Trade Center, out of all of this thing here, the terrorist attack, 2,996 people killed, and 6,000 people got injured. That changed a lot of things, Madam President, a lot of things. And one of the things that this event changed, Madam President, is the way money was being transferred or moved around in our global space. For all of this, Madam President, the United States and the other G20 countries, or G7, G20 countries, came together and they said, look, we need to ensure that we do not, or terrorists do not have access to the monies that they have been using for their activities. The free flow of monies need to stop. Or we need to have a better monitoring system of these flows of monies. And therefore, Madam President, pressures were being put on all regulatory systems, all central banks, local banks, financial institutions, as to the way monies are transferred. Because, Madam President, they are trying to see how best that they can avoid these terrorists from getting the finances that they need to undertake the terrorist attacks. So, Madam President, it was a very emotional period, and rightly so. Rightly so. Because close to 3,000 people were killed in one day. One day. Not only that, Madam President, they look further into beyond just the transfer of monies, but how do these terrorists hide behind businesses in order to get the finances that they need? And how do they address this concern, Madam President? How do they address that concern? Well, Madam President, as I said earlier, because of globalization, the global space became very competitive, very extremely competitive. And small states like St. Lucia and others tried to see how best they could attract foreign direct investment or just attract business to their shores. And therefore, certain pieces of legislation were put together to attract such businesses. And one of the areas that these economies looked into was that of the financial services sector. And we saw, Madam President, there was a growth in that sector in many of these small jurisdictions. Many. And Madam President, pressures came on these jurisdictions because in the minds of the EU and the OECD that the terrorists again were hiding their monies in these jurisdictions. And therefore, in order to avoid such from happening, the EU and the OECD came together and put certain agreements, some tax regimes and standards to ensure that the individual legislation or regimes do not, or does not, each one of them will not push the agenda of these terrorists. No hiding of money anymore, Madam President. No hiding behind businesses anymore. So what happened in recent times, Madam President? The EU and the OECD examined the various tax regimes of various jurisdictions. And they said to them, and to us, St. Lucia, that these regimes do not meet our international tax standards. Which means, Madam President, they ask for us to make the amendments necessary to ensure that we are on par with their international standards. So as early as last year, Madam President, we received a letter from the EU, the European Union, asking us basically to comply with these standards. In essence, they said to us that we have examined your tax structures, your tax regimes, and they fall below our international tax standards. Make the adjustments. But before receiving the letter, Madam President, we were placed on a blacklist. We were blacklisted with 17 other jurisdictions. Blacklisted. And I remember that when this was announced, and very unfortunately, Madam President, that we got the voice of the opposition in the air, blaming this current administration for being blacklisted. But I immediately corrected the leader of the opposition at the time that it is not so. We did nothing wrong on this side of the world. We did absolutely nothing wrong. St. Lucia has been and consistently been in compliance with all the requirements of these international agencies or institutions, always. But we were blacklisted. So we got a letter asking us, basically, to make the amendments. What we did, Madam President, we wrote to the European Union and said, look, we acknowledge your letter, we acknowledge your requests, and we will comply. That alone, Madam President, had us to be removed from the blacklist into the grey list. But they give us a deadline to make the amendments. And that deadline is 31st December 2018. So we're about 6 weeks away from the deadline. And that's why we are here today, Madam President. Again, in compliance, the consistent compliance with the request of the EU. And Madam President, I must say to you, I don't intend to talk about, the iron fists in all of this. But it is an iron fist. But I was very happy, Madam President, to see the coming together, more or less a voice, coming together of the lower house, the opposition in the lower house, and that of the government on Tuesday. Understanding that this fight is not a fight of the United Workers' Party government, but it's a fight for St. Lucia that we have to undertake as a country. Not as a United Workers' Party government, but as a government, as a parliament, as a country, understanding where we are and why we are where we are. And I was very happy to see a change in the tone of the leader of the opposition at the time. Not blaming this government, but we are in this thing together. We are in this thing together. So, Madam President, there are many concerns of the EU in terms of the tax evasion, tax avoidance, money laundering, terrorist financing. These are the concerns. So that's why we are here today, Madam President, to make the amendments as requested of the EU. As requested. And therefore, Madam President, we are hoping that our submission, our meeting today and the meeting that we had in the lower house on Tuesday would meet these requirements and meet the deadline as stipulated by the European Union. There is no guarantee, Madam President. There is no guarantee that after doing all of this, that we will be removed from the blacklist. We don't know that. Because we are not the ones with, I would say, we are not the main player there. We are not. We are not the one ruling or having the authority, and we are not. We are almost like a puppet on a string. Almost. So today we are here to make all of these amendments, Madam President, all of these amendments in fulfilling the requirements of the European Union as far as meeting what they refer to as the international tax standards. So therefore, Madam President, before us today is the Companies Act. And that's the first amendment we will be undertaking today, Madam President, among the others 6. So the first amendment to this act is the insertion of a new section, 69A. And this provides that a company incorporating under this act must provide a notice of beneficial owners. This will not apply to the following companies as indicated earlier. That is, a company that is a public company, B, a multilateral institution, C, a government entity, D, a pension fund that is regulated by the government in the country of origin of the pension fund, and E, licensed and regulated by the Financial Services Regulatory Authority under the Financial Services Regulatory Authority Act, Cap 1223. Madam President, Section 77 or 177 will be amended. And that amendment, Madam President, places an obligation of a company to prepare and maintain a register of the beneficial owner and the related details such as the name of the beneficial owner, percentage of shares owned, and address as indicated. The third amendment is that of Section 190, Madam President. And Section 190 of the Principal Act is amended under subsection 1 by inserting immediately after the words legal representatives, the words, quote, Madam President, and the competent authority, close quote. By inserting the words competent authority, it allows access to the records of a company. The fourth amendment to this act, Madam President, is that of Section 344, and that is to ensure that an external company registering under this act provides the beneficial owner information as explained above in Amendment Section 355. Madam President, the fifth amendment is amendment of Sections 377C and 377K, which has the same effects of need for the collection of beneficial ownership information wherever there is a need to collect records. And the final, Madam President, amendment to the Companies Act is Section 551. And this amendment, Madam President, provides for the insertion of the definition of beneficial owner, as explained above, and the definition competent authority means that the competent authority under the Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information Act and the ultimately own of control means direct or indirect ownership or control of 25% or more of shares, voting rights, or ownership interest in a company. Again, Madam President, these are the necessary adjustments that was asked of us here in St. Lucia to be made to the Companies Act. Thank you very much.
Honorable Senators, the question is that the Companies Amendment Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the Companies Act, Cap 13.01.
We'll take it clause by clause. Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 3.
Insertion of new section 69A.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 4.
Amendment of section 177.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 5.
Amendment of section 190.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 6.
Amendment of section 344.
Clause 6 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 7.
Amendment of section 355.
Clause 7 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 8.
Amendment of section 377C.
Clause 8 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 9.
Amendment of section 377K.
Clause 9 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 10.
Amendment of section 551.
Clause 10 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Senators, the question is that committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the company's amendment bill went through committee stage with amendments, without amendments. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the company's amendment bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the Companies Amendment Act 2018.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the first reading of a bill shortly entitled International Trust Amendment.
International Trust Amendment.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order 49-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Proceed, Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And I beg to move for the second reading of a bill shortly entitled International Trust Amendment. And Madam President, the amendments for this act, basically we will be undertaking 5 major, I would say just 5 amendments, I would say, 5 sections, maybe more, 5, maybe 6. And the first amendment is of that of Section 2. It will insert the definition of a beneficial owner information, as explained earlier. The second one, Madam President, we will repeal Sections 8 and 9. Now, Sections 8 and 9 of the Principal Act are repealed. This would, in effect, mean that no new trust can be registered pursuant to this Act. However, any trust registered pursuant to this Act will continue in existence until June 2021, Madam President. It is the intention of the government to institute a Trust Act, which will allow for the registration of all trusts regardless of their origin. This Act will take into consideration the criteria of the OECD and the EU. The other amendment, Madam President, is that of Section 10, and Section 10 of the Principal Act is amended by inserting immediately after subsection 4 the following new subsection. 5, an international trust shall not acquire any new asset or engage in a purpose other than the purpose for which it was established from the first day of December 2018. And the other one, Madam President, is that Cabinet is now asked to consider the grandfathering provision, which was inadvertently omitted from these amendments. This allows for the entities registered pursuant to this Act to continue to operate until 30th June 2021. Amendment of Section 4 of the Principal Act is amended by inserting immediately after subsection 1 the following new subsection. That is 2. This Act will continue to apply to entities registered prior to 1st December 2018 until the 30th day of June 2021. And finally, Madam President, the final amendment to this International Trust Act is that of Section 52. And this amendment will facilitate the collection of both legal and beneficial ownership information by a trust and ensuring that the trust is kept for a minimum period and available to the competent authority on request.
Honourable Senators, the question is that the International Trust Amendment Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the International Trust Act, Cap 12.19.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 3.
Amendment to Section 2.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 4.
Repeal of Section 8 and 9.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 5.
Amendment to Section 10.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 6.
Amendment of Section 52.
Clause 6 stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Senators, the question is that the committee rise and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the International Trust Amendment Bill went through committee stage without amendments. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the International Trust Amendment Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the International Trust Amendment Act 2018.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the first reading of a bill shortly entitled International Business Companies Amendment.
International Business Companies Amendment.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order 49-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Proceed, Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. And I beg to move that the second reading of a bill shortly entitled International Business Companies Amendment. Madam President, this is perhaps the regime that has the most extensive amendments. And bear with me, Madam President, while I make mention of the amendments under this Act. This Act is being substantially amended in the interest of time in an effort to fulfill international deadlines, as I said earlier. It is the intention of this government to place all companies under one Act. The present amendments have the effect of removing all previous benefits enjoyed solely by an IBC, International Business Companies or Corporation. A company under the Amendment Act will be no different to a company registered pursuant to the Companies Act. Therefore, Madam President, First Amendment is of Section 2, and Section 2 of the Principal Act is amended by inserting the following new definitions in the correct alphabetical sequence: beneficial owner, competent authority, ultimately own or control. The second is that of Section 3. And this amendment is being done to effect or to limit the activities of any company incorporated under this legislation prior to December 2018 to the activities for which it was incorporated. These are the companies which are grandfathered and can continue to benefit under the Act previous to today's amendment. Next amendment, Madam President, is that of Section 4, which has the effect of close-off registration of companies for the period of 1 month for the purpose of allowing the relevant administrative structures to be put in place for the registration of new companies under the amended legislation. Amendment of Section 5. Section 5 of the Principal Act is amended under subsections 3, 4, and 5 by deleting the word minister. This is necessary as a process of approval and monitoring is done by the Financial Services Regulatory Authority for all entities engaged in banking, insurance, and mutual funds. The insertion of a new section called Section 5A. And this will pertain to any company registered from the 1st January 2019. Parliament is now asked to consider the rewording of the new Section 5A3 as follows. A company registered pursuant to this Act shall have an adequate 1. Number of employees with the necessary level of qualification and experience. 2. Amount of operating expenses. And 3. Investment and capital commensurate with the type and level of activity undertaken. Madam President, the other amendment is that done to Section 12 of the Act. And this will provide that a company incorporated prior to the 1st of December 2018 shall continue to enjoy the benefits until 30th day of June 2021. Amendment of Section 18. Section 18 of the Principal Act is amended by inserting immediately after the word located the words quoted in or. Amendment Section 28. Amendment of Section 28. And this is to allow for the collection of beneficial ownership information by a company. This will be done in conjunction with the collection of share register information, which is already collected on an annual basis. The importance of the collection of this type of information was already expounded above. Madam President, the other amendment is amendment to Section 67, which will ensure that the beneficial ownership, once collected, will be accessible to the competent authority. The next amendment is that of Section 109, which provides stamp duty exemption to a company incorporated in this Act shall come to an end. However, companies registered prior to 1st December 2018 under this Act will come to an end on the 30th day of June 2021. Insertion of a new Section 109A. The Act is amended by inserting immediately after Section 109 the following new Section 109, which will provide that the transfer of any property which has the effect of changing the beneficial or legal owner of an immovable property in St. Lucia shall pay stamp duty as any other company. Next will be the amendment of Section 113A. It will provide the understanding that any new headquarter company incorporated prior to 1st December 2018 shall enjoy the benefits of the election to pay 0 to 1% tax until 30th June 2021. A company incorporated after the 31st December shall be subject to the Income Tax Act and will no longer have the election of or 1% tax rate. This ends the amendment to the International Business Companies Act, Madam President.
Honorable Senators, the question is that the International Business Companies Amendment Bill be read a second time. Senator Thomas Francis.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I'd like to compliment the Leader of Government Business on his detailed explanation earlier on in terms of the rationale for introducing all those various amendments to those existing acts. Madam President, from my experience, IBCs generate a significant amount of revenue for the state in general, and specifically to lawyers and to the banking sector. However, the banks have been challenged over the years in their quest to ensure that they comply fully with the Money Laundering Prevention Act, the Anti-Terrorist Act, and the rest of the acts governing these kinds of activities. And I believe the banking sector will be very heartened with the changes, particularly as it relates to the disclosure of the beneficial owners of the companies. That requirement is very important. And also the fact that every time beneficial ownership change, there'll be a refresh, you know, in the legislation and, of course, in the registry. It is going to provide much ease. Why do I say so, Madam President? A lot of those IBCs, they are very complex. Complex from the perspective that you will be approached at a bank to open an account for an IBC. And the IBC will state that the shareholders are Company X, Company Y, Company Z. There is a requirement to establish beneficial ownership for the very reason that the Leader of Government Business highlighted. We need to ensure that there is full disclosure, full compliance with all those international acts and the acts governing our affairs here. There is the requirement also to ensure that where there's non-compliance, that we report to the financial intelligence authorities, because, of course, if we don't, especially as it relates to various thresholds that have been established, there are penalties, stiff penalties that the banking sector face, i.e. they can lose their license, and there are penalties for individuals at all levels in the bank relative to fines and even imprisonment. So it has been a daunting task lifting the veil to try and establish who beneficial owners are. So when you have 3 entities that are beneficial owners of an IBC, you lift the veil, then you find there's another 3 or 4 entities that are beneficial owners. You continue to lift, and no exaggeration, Madam President, it would take sometimes as long as a year, 2 years to be able to get into the ultimate beneficial ownership of an IBC. But, you know, and the lifting of the veil takes forever because those IBCs, while they are registered here, the owners are all over the world. So to get into the banking system and to get into doing those level of due diligence, it takes forever. So I think the banking sector will be breathing a sigh of relief. So I thank you very much, Mr. Leader of Government Business, on their behalf. And I also think that, you know, the IMF will be heartened because in the last Article 4 consultation review, I see a note there which says directors also underscored the importance of strengthening the AML CFT regime, reinforcing due diligence procedures under the CIP program and addressing gaps in compliance with international tax rules and so on. So IMF will be happy to know that the government has strengthened, because this in fact is going to help in doing due diligence relative to the CIP. And of course, it is going to ease the burden on the banking sector in terms of knowing the beneficial owners of these companies, because all they'll have to do is to go into the registry and get the information. I thank you very much, Madam President.
Madam President, I always welcome the contribution of Independent Senator Francis and her insights into the various motions and bills and everything we bring here. And of course, given the fact that she is well versed in the banking sector, she was able to make this valuable contribution and observation. And, you know, we are in a totally different world, as I said earlier. And it's a situation where the highest levels of regulators are asking financial institutions to know their customers and their ownerships, the owners behind owners, so to speak. And of course, as I alluded in my briefing, all of this is to ensure that the owners or the people who are behind these businesses are people who are not engaged in the terrorist and the money laundering and so on, and those people who are trying to evade taxes and so on. So this is a good compliance measure. In fact, you mentioned the CIP, and one of the things I didn't mention earlier, Madam President, was that while we are being asked to make amendments to our current business and tax regimes, I can say to you, Madam President, the international authorities are already coming after our CIP programs. To them, they are seeing this as another avenue by which monies could be laundered and so on. So, Madam President, it's not an easy world for small states like ours, who are trying our best to engage in legitimate enterprises. As I say enterprises, but to have legitimate legislation that attract businesses to our shores, increase our foreign reserves and so on. So it is very sad, but it's the reality that we are dealing with today. So the whole idea of de-risking, Madam President, I didn't mention earlier. Again, this is not about the banks, the local banks imposing their requirements on our local consumers, but it's what is being asked of them at various levels. To the highest level, Madam President, they have to comply the very same way countries and governments must comply to the requirements of institutions, the EU and the OECD. So it is something that we are challenged with, and we have to be creative. We have to be innovative in the products that we create to attract the required investment to our shores. As I said earlier, Madam President, we are doing what was required of us now. Let us see what happens later, what the requirements will be later. But as we have always done, we will continue to be compliant with the requirements of these international institutions.
Honourable Senators, the question is that the International Business Companies Amendment Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the International Business Companies Act, Cap 12.14.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Clause 3.
Amendment of Section 2.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill. Clause 4.
Amendment of Section 3.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill. Clause 5.
Amendment of Section 4.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill. Clause 6.
Amendment of Section 5.
Clause 6 stands part of the bill. Clause 7.
Insertion of new Section 5A.
Clause 7 stands part of the bill. Clause 8.
Amendment of Section 12.
Clause 8 stands part of the bill. Clause 9.
Amendment of Section 18.
Clause 9 stands part of the bill. Clause 10.
Amendment of Section 28.
Clause 10 stands part of the bill. Clause 11.
Amendment of Section 67.
Clause 11 stands part of the bill. Clause 12.
Amendment of Section 109.
Clause 12 stands part of the bill. Clause 13.
Insertion of new Section 109A.
Clause 13 stands part of the bill. Clause 14.
Amendment of Section 113A.
Clause 14 stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Senators, the question is that the committee rise and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the International Business Companies Amendment Bill went through committee stage without amendments. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. And I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the International Business Companies Amendment Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the International Business Companies Amendment Act 2018.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move the first reading of a bill shortly entitled International Partnership Amendment.
International Partnership Amendment.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order 49-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Proceed, Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. And I beg to move the second reading of a bill shortly entitled International Partnership Amendment. The amendments, Madam President, to this International Partnership Act is as follows. The amendments are as follows. Amendment of Section 2. This requires the insertion of the definition of beneficial owners for the reasons indicated earlier. Amendment of Section 3. This closes the registration of new entities under this Act and allow existing companies to continue to enjoy the benefits of the current legislation until 30th June 2021. The impact is that after this date, the Act will be repealed. Amendment of Section 3, or Section 7 rather, this provides for the collection of beneficial owner information as indicated earlier. This includes the name, address, percentage of shares held, and any consequent change to this information during the course of the year. Madam President, there will be a repeal of Sections 9, 14, and 15. The result of these changes is that no new entity can be registered under this Act. The government, however, will not be pursuing the replacement of this Act as it has not incurred the benefits which were expected. And finally, under this Act, Madam President, we are undertaking an amendment of Section 24. And based on this amendment, an existing entity cannot engage in any new business activity. This means that any entity formed for the purpose of one activity cannot change this business activity or add any new activity.
Honorable Senators, the question is that the International Partnership Amendment Bill be read a second time.
Madam.
Senator Thomas Francis.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a quick question for Leader of Government Business. I meant to ask that earlier, but it slipped me. Why is the bill why is the date for the Act to be repealed? I just want to understand. Amendment of Section 3, where it says that Section 4.8 will only apply to an international partnership registered prior to the first day of December 2018 and continues to apply to that international partnership until 30th of June 2021. Why 2021? Just for information purposes, thanks.
This was the requirement for we are just in compliance with the requirement of the OECD, the EU OECD, yes. Yeah, that was the date given to us, yes.
Honorable Senators, the question is that the International Partnership Amendment Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the International Partnership Act, Cap 12.21.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 3.
Amendment of Section 2.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 4.
Amendment of Section 3.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 5.
Amendment of Section 7.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 6.
Repeal of Sections 9, 14, and 15.
Clause 6 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 7.
Amendment of Section 24.
Clause 7 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 1.
Short title. Clause
1 stands part of the bill. Aye. Senators, the question is that the committee rise and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the International Partnership Amendment Bill went through committee stage without amendments. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the International Partnership Amendment Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the International Partnership Amendment Act 2018.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move the first reading of a bill shortly entitled Income Tax Amendment.
Income Tax Amendment.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order 49-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages of this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Proceed, Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. And I beg to move the reading or the second reading of a bill shortly entitled Income Tax Amendment. Madam President, the amendment of the Income Tax Act is the most fundamental of the changes being considered by the House today. The amendment of the income tax is in keeping with the government's thinking of growing the St. Lucian economy. These changes mean that St. Lucia's tax system changes from a worldwide tax system to a territorial tax system. This system is specific to the companies and not individuals. Individuals will still be taxed on the worldwide income, whilst companies will be taxed only on their domestic source income. Therefore, Madam President, these are the amendments. Section 2 of the Principal Act is amended by the deletion and insertion of a new definition of permanent establishment. The new definition will ensure that St. Lucia is in compliance with international standards. Number 2, the amendment of Section 8. Section 8 of the Principal Act is amended to remove from the accessible income of a company any income accrued from a source outside of St. Lucia. The next amendment is that of Section 10, and this amendment is made to clearly identify all income that is deemed to accrue in St. Lucia and therefore taxable in St. Lucia. Next is the insertion of a new Section 10A. This section specifies and delineates income that is derived outside of St. Lucia and therefore not taxable in St. Lucia. This provision applies only to corporations and not individuals. Amendment of Section 32 has the simple effect of excluding foreign source income of a company from accessible income. The next amendment is that of Section 33, and this reiterates the point that the accessible income of a company shall not include income from a source outside of St. Lucia. Amendment of Section 76 provides that where a company earns income from a foreign source and makes a payment towards an expense incurred to generate that income, it is exempt from withholding tax. Parliament is asked to amend the statement to assure that it applies only to companies as follows: payments made by a company towards an expense incurred to generate income from a source outside St. Lucia. And finally, Madam President, as far as amendments are concerned with regards to the Income Tax Act, is the amendment to Section 84, and it's for the purpose of monitoring all companies that will be required to file and indicate the foreign source income. Prior to this amendment, a company under the International Business Act, which elected to be exempt, was not required to file an income tax return. Thank you, Madam President.
Leader of Government Business, number 6. Clause 5 of the bill amends Section 10(1)(e). I heard 10(1)(a), and I just want to be clear for Hansard's.
Madam President, is 10(a). He talked about Section 6. There is no amendment to Section 6.
Number 6, Clause 5, on the front page.
1 second, Madam President. Clause 5. Okay. There is an insertion of a new Section 10(a). That's it. So the amendment to Section 10 is an insertion of 10(a).
Section 10(1)(e). I'm just making sure your number 6 reads like mine. Okay. Which is, it says, Clause 5 of the bill amends Section 10(1)(e). You said A.
Okay. So, Madam President, I stand corrected. I think it is 10(e). Yeah. Yes. Yes. Thank you very much.
Honorable Senators, the question is that the Income Tax Amendment Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the Income Tax Act, Cap 15.02.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Clause 3.
Amendment of Section 2.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill. Clause 4.
Amendment of Section 8.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill. Clause 5.
Amendment of Section 10.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill. Clause 6.
Insertion of new Section 10A.
Clause 6 stands part of the bill. Clause 7.
Amendment of Section 32.
Clause 7 stands part of the bill. Clause 8.
Amendment of Section 33.
Clause 8 stands part of the bill. Clause 9.
Amendment of Section 76.
Clause 9 stands part of the bill. Clause 10.
Amendment of Section 84.
Clause 10 stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Senators, the question is that the committee rise and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Income Tax Amendment Bill went through committee stage without amendments. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Income Tax Amendment Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the Income Tax Amendment Act 2018.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move the first reading of a bill shortly entitled Automatic Exchange of Financial Information Amendment.
Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information Amendment.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order 49-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
The question is that Standing Order 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Proceed, Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. And I beg to move the second reading of a bill shortly entitled Automatic Exchange of Financial Information Amendment. Madam President, this is the last of the amendments to the financial bills, I would say. Well, we have one more, may I ask? Yeah, there is one more. Okay, I thought this was the last one. This is a very short amendment to this act. And the section, the first section that will be amended is section 14. And it is amended, Madam President, to ensure that the timing for which information is collected by a reporting financial institution is in keeping with that of the Global Forum. Based on the Global Forum's assessment, it was found that there was a difference in the retention of information by St. Lucia needed to be rectified. Section 16.1, Madam President, has the effect of making every person, including a reporting financial institution, who fails to comply with a duty or obligation under the Act or regulation is liable to a penalty of $5,000 and a further penalty of $2,000 for each or part of the month that the failure continues. Previously, only a reporting financial institution was held liable. Madam President, I know that I have to deal with one more of the bills as it pertains to the amendments required by the EU and the OECD. But, Madam President, I just want to take the time to thank the Department of Finance, particularly the Director of Finance, PS of Finance, the staff of the Attorney General's Chambers, and the staff of the Inland Revenue Departments led by Ms. Sophia Henry. Madam President, for the hard work they put into all of these requirements and amendments. Madam President, I saw the spirit of what public servants should be. The hard work, the dedication, the commitment. I saw professionalism. I saw talent. I saw tolerance. You know, this is the quality of the public servants we have in St. Lucia. They are modeled. I know they put a lot of hard work in this thing, Madam President. Not the first time. But given the deadline we had to meet, and we will meet that deadline, Madam President, the deadline of 31st December 2018. So I want to put on record my heartfelt thanks to these three departments and the individuals who worked very hard on these amendments. Thank you.
Honourable Senators, the question is that the Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information Amendment Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information Act number 22 of 2016.
Clause 2 stands for Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Clause 3.
Amendment to Section 14.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill. Clause 4.
Amendment to Section 16.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill. Clause 5. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Senators, the question is that the committee rise and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information Amendment Bill went through the committee stage without amendment. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information Amendment Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information Amendment Act 2018.
Madam President, looking at the order of the bills, I realized that I was hoping that the placement of the free zone would have been part of the amendments, previous amendments. But we have the agreement of extradition instead before the free zone. So could you allow me to just complete the amendments? Basically, bringing up free zone from last to the one before the last.
Madam, please proceed, Madam Clerk. Page 30, 38, 39. For you.
Madam President, I beg to move for the first reading of a bill shortly entitled Free Zone Amendment.
Free Zone Amendment.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order 49-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Proceed, Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move the second reading of a bill shortly entitled Free Zone Amendment. Madam President, just like the previous amendments, this bill is basically to make the adjustments required to meet the tax standards of the EU OECD, and basically we'll be making adjustments or amendments to sections 2, sections 2, 7, 10. We'll be inserting a new section, that of 10A, and we'll be amending section 11, an insertion of a new section in 15A, and amending section 19. Also, Madam President, with this amendment, we will be amending Schedule 2 of the Act. Madam President, we are hoping this, while I didn't go into detail as to exactly what these amendments are, but I'm hopeful and we are very confident that we have met, based on these amendments, we'll be meeting all the requirements are stipulated by the European Union as far as what they coin the standard tax regimes, international standard tax regimes. And I'm happy, Madam President, as I said earlier, that we will be able to work hard and with commitments and dedication, that we will fulfill all these requirements. And there is no guarantee, Madam President, that in fulfilling these requirements, that we will be removed off the blacklist. In fact, off the grey list. That's where we are now. But Madam President, so I want to say thank you again to all the 3 departments I made mention of earlier. That is the Department of Finance, the Department of Inland Revenue, and of course the Attorney General's Chambers. And I want to thank my colleagues for their hard work and dedication and for seeing us through where we are now as far as these amendments are concerned. And I'm looking forward, Madam President, that this last amendment to the free zone would be accepted and approved by the members opposite. Thank you.
Honourable Senators, the question is that the Free Zone Amendment Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the Free Zone Act, Cap 15.17.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 3.
Amendment of Section 2.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 4.
Amendment of Section 7.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 5.
Amendment of Section 10.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 6.
Insertion of new Section 10A.
Clause 6 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 7.
Amendment of Section 11.
Clause 7 stands part of the bill. Clause 8.
Insertion of new Section 15A.
Clause 8 stands part of the bill. Clause 9.
Amendment of Section 19.
Clause 9 stands part of the bill. Clause 10.
Amendment of Schedule 2.
Clause 10 stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Senators, the question is that the committee rise and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Free Zone Amendment Bill went through committee stage without amendment. Honorable Leader of Government.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Free Zone Amendment Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the Free Zone Amendment Act 2018.
Honorable Minister for Home Affairs, Justice and National Security.
Madam President, I beg to move the first reading of a bill shortly entitled Agreement on Extradition, St. Lucia and the French Republic Act.
Agreement on Extradition, St. Lucia and the French Republic.
Honorable Minister for Home Affairs, Justice and National Security.
Madam President, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Orders number 49-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Minister for Home Affairs, Justice and National Security to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Proceed, Honorable Minister for Home Affairs, Justice and National Security.
Thank you, Madam President. I beg to move the second reading of a bill shortly entitled Agreement on Extradition, St. Lucia and the French Republic. Madam President, this bill has been around for a very long time. The discussion started over 20 years ago with the French Republic. And the only thing that really held this piece of legislation back was the fact that St. Lucia has capital punishment on its books. And as we know, the French territories do not subscribe to capital punishment. So we had to discussed this at length, and I need to thank the Honorable DPP, Mr. Dacian Green, for his intervention on these matters. I just want to highlight 3 sections of the Act. Article 3, extraditable offenses, which tells us the types of offenses that we are looking at. Extradition shall be granted in respect of offenses punishable under the laws of both parties by deprivation of liberty for a maximum period of at least 2 years or by a more severe penalty. Well, the more severe penalty in the case of the French is that it's much more than 2 years. In ours, it would be capital punishment. We also look at Article 4, the monetary grounds for refusing extradition, and I think that is very important. A, for the offenses, the requested party considers a political offense or an offense connected with a political offense. So if we were to have somebody down here dealing in our politics, then we would not be able to ask for extradition from Martinique or Guadeloupe back to St. Lucia. The very same principle would happen to the French territories. We also would not allow for extradition if it means that you're punishing a person because of his race, religion, nationality, or political opinion. So these 2 areas we would refuse to extradite that individual. I talked about capital punishment in Article 7, and I said that this was the bone of contention with the French. We have been able to agree that if a French individual has committed murder in St. Lucia, we would not the sentence of death on that individual, and he would be extradited back to Martinique or Guadeloupe or other French territories. One of the very interesting parts of this bill is that where we have a third party, so if there is somebody in St. Lucia and he is not St. Lucian, but the Martinicans or Guadeloupans want him, then they would have to make documents available to St. Lucia. And if we think that it is an offense that should be punished, then we can extradite that individual. So this is really the crux of the agreement between St. Lucia and the French Republic. I'm sure that we know the amount of individuals from St. Lucia who have gone across to our neighboring country, Martinique, and have committed offenses. And this is a bone of contention between Martinique and St. Lucia. Before, there were about 54 requests made to us to send persons from St. Lucia back to Martinique. But we could not have done that because there was no mutual legal assistance in place. So this bill, this act, now clears the way that if an individual commits a crime in Martinique, then he can be extradited to Martinique. So this is the essence of the bill. Thank you.
Honourable Senators, the question is that the agreement on extradition, St. Lucia and the French Republic bill be read a second time. Senator Henry?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Just briefly, I notice there's very little we can do in the matter of the French Republic and our island here, but just to, Madam President, just to point out, it seemed, in my opinion, almost like a David-Goliath relationship, and that I do not see the equal rights of the citizens from both jurisdictions receiving what I think is fair, as against what our penal code here in St. Lucia and what is happening. And if you have 2 individuals involved in some criminal offense, that one party is expected to receive a lesser sentence or is expected if the person is a St. Lucian to face the full blunt, and the Martinican, on the other hand, would be move across to the place to receive a lighter sentence. As we do these things and reflect on our own citizens, Madam President, I think it's time for us to resolve the issue of some of the hard laws we have on our books. I am one that do not subscribe to the whole executing of killing of persons. I personally do not think of it, but it plays out in a matter where we have an extradition treaty with a powerful country where that is not on the books and it's on ours. We should, maybe a time where we should look at our citizens maybe in the same way that some countries like this are looking at their people as well. It is something for us to reflect on. But I know it is difficult for us. We are moving and we need to sort of maintain certain cordial relationships with these countries. Our neighboring island there, Martinique, I do not think it is only St. Lucians who are participating in the criminal activity. I think there are Martinicans who are encouraging that activity as well. And I do not like to see all fingers pointing on just our people here. I am aware that there's criminal activity, and some of our people are moving across to do so. But, Madam President, I can tell you as an individual, my mom and my two sisters are Martinicans. They've been there for the past 50 years. I've never spent more than 3 days as a child visiting my mom because of how you feel when you're in that island. We make them feel a lot more at home here when they come here than they make us feel when they go to Martinique. I know that for a fact. And that kind of sentiments, I think it is something that we need to represent in the discourse between ourselves and the French officials. We need to represent our people and let them know generally how our people feel as it relates to how we are treated by them. And as we embark on the treaty, I would like the whole gambit of that kind of discussion so that our people are always represented in full in this sort of thing. But thank you very much, and I understand this.
Honorable Minister for Home Affairs, Justice and National Security.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to thank the Leader of Opposition Business for his remarks. But he made a comment that that persons may be coming here to commit crime. The evidence has not shown that. If you ask the police, they will tell you that those persons do not come to St. Lucia, and we have the cause to arrest Martinicans or Guadeloupans for committing crime in St. Lucia. So I just wanted to dispel this. But the subject of capital punishment is one that I think has to be taken up in St. Lucia. A lot of us maybe don't believe in the system of capital punishment, but this is what is on our law books. And I think the time has come for we as a people to have a frank discussion, and I do hope that the powers that be will activate that discussion as soon as possible. St. Lucia has been invited to international forums to give the thinking on the death penalty, and next year I'll be traveling and going up and give St. Lucia's stance on capital punishment. And I wish that before I do that I would have had a sense of what St. Lucians think and what the government and the opposition think about capital punishment. So I think it is an opportune time for us as a people to bring this topic up and have a frank discussion on whether we should actually keep the death penalty. Thank you.
Honorable Senators, the question is that the agreement on extradition St. Lucia and the French Republic Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to give legal effect and to provide for the implementation of the agreement on extradition between the government of St. Lucia and the government of the French Republic and for related matters.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Clause 3.
Force of law.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill. Clause 4.
Regulations.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill. Clause 5. Sorry. Schedule.
Sections 2 and 3, agreement on extradition between the government of St. Lucia and the government of the French Republic.
Schedule stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Senators, the question is that the committee rise and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable Minister for Home Affairs, Justice and National Security.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, I beg to report that the agreement on extradition, St. Lucia and the French Republic bill went through committee stage without amendment. Justice and National Security.
Madam President, I beg to move the first reading of a bill shortly entitled Child. Oh. I have it. Okay. Have to see that again? Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the agreement on extradition, St. Lucia and the French Republic bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the Agreement on Extradition, St. Lucia and the French Republic Act 2018.
Honorable Minister for Home Affairs, Justice and National Security.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I beg to move the first reading of a bill shortly entitled Child Care Protection and Adoption.
Child Care Protection and Adoption.
Honorable Minister for Home Affairs, Justice and National Security.
Madam President, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order number 49-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Minister for Home Affairs, Justice and National Security to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Proceed, Honorable Minister for Home Affairs, Justice and National Security.
Madam President, I beg to move the second reading of a bill shortly entitled Child Care, Protection and Adoption. Madam President, I beg your indulgence to give a little history of the reform agenda, but I would also like to include the child justice bill that will come following this one, so I don't have to repeat it when the child justice bill comes about. The Child Protection and Child Justice Reform agenda.
And Honorable Minister,
yes.
Just to repeat that we still need to deal with them separately.
Thank you, Madam President. The Child Protection and Child Justice Reform agenda began in earnest with St. Lucia signing on to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child on June 16, 1993. That's a very long time ago. Signifying the state's recognition of its responsibility to children, particularly the vulnerable. In so doing, St. Lucia committed to progressively modernize the child protection and child justice landscape in St. Lucia. In keeping with its global child justice commitment, 1, legislative and policy framework, 2, institutional arrangements, and 3, service and program interventions had to be made. Upon signing the CRC, majority of the OECS member states found that the present legislation was inadequate and in most cases a deterrent to creating a child-friendly society. The OECS Commission, as part of its mandate to both regularize and harmonize legislation across the Union, initiated a comprehensive program get at reforming laws associated with family and domestic violence. The OECS Commission and USAID commenced the OECS Juvenile Justice Reform Project in 2012, of which a key component was the modernization of legislation pertaining to children. The model legislation saw the creation of 2 model child bills, 1, Child Care and Adoption Bill, addressing children in need of care and protection, and 2, Child Justice Bill, addressing children in conflict with the law. These draft bills are yet to be enacted in St. Lucia. The objective of the Child Care, Protection and Adoption Bill. The purpose of this bill is to provide for care and protection of children and for other related matters. The bill is based on the recognition of the needs to take legislative action to safeguard and promote the welfare of children. The bill will seek to provide that in all actions and decisions made pursuant to the provisions of the bill concerning a child, the safety, welfare, and well-being of that child shall be of paramount consideration, and the same principle shall apply where a child has been removed from his or her parents. The care and protection of a child from abuse and neglect in a manner that ensures that the best interests of the child are given paramount considerations, and the adoption of a child in any way that 1, promotes the well-being and best interests of the adopted child throughout its life, and 2, supports efficient and accountable practice in the delivery of adoption services. Because of that, this new bill, there will be changes that the bill will engender. A child is now deemed to be under the age of 18 compared to what was previously existed. A child was under the age of 15, 15, I say 15, I think it's 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16 The legislation specifically identifies the Division of Human Services as the responsible agency for all child protection and adoption matters nationally. The legislation incorporates adoption, which was previously the responsibility of the Attorney General's chambers. It calls for the creation of an adoption committee. Foster care is incorporated into the legislation, making it a formal safety net in the overall social safety net reform agenda in St. Lucia. It clearly articulates the processes by which a child can be taken into state care, access services, and be reintegrated with their family. A strong focus is placed on reunification of children with their families, a focus on providing social services to the family unit, and the strengthening support to foster care. Madam President, based on what we now have as the Child Care Protection and Adoption Bill, a few things will change. The Children and Young Persons Act is now obsolete. The section, which doesn't come to mind readily, of the Criminal Code, which deals with consent for sexual intercourse, has been abolished. And so now, the age of consent was 16. Now it has gone to 18 years of age. So I want to make sure that our young men in society understand that and deal accordingly with this new change. So, like I said earlier, this has been a bill that has been long outstanding, and I think that it is opportune that we now need to take care of our children. We have many children in need of care and protection, and we have many people in St. Lucia who have the ability to provide that care and protection. This bill will allow for the proper adoption processes to be taking place and for the monitoring of persons who have been placed in foster care. And it then now puts the burden on the government to find a place of safety for our girls. There is a place for boys presently, which is not the best, but we do have a place for the boys. And so now we have to find a place for vulnerable girls. Thank you.
Senator, okay. Leader of Opposition Business, Senator Henry. Senators, the question is that the Child Care Protection Adoption Bill be read a second time. Senator Ferdinand.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise to make a couple of observations regarding this bill. I was very heartened with some of what the Minister for National Security pointed out that may change regarding this bill. And I think quite a few of these issues have been issues that have confronted us at different sectors, particularly at the in the schools. And as you know, most of the time when I speak in the House, I always highlight issues that relate to our education system. We do have an Education Act, and many times we find that there are certain areas that may appear to conflict what is either in the criminal code or in some of our other laws. And one such example is in relation to the age of consent and what you can actually do in schools. For example, a child or a young person, because you also have the definition of a child and the definition of a young person, and all of that is, you know, is beginning to raise questions. We have youth, we have young person, and we have child. So I think that type of legislation will assist in helping us as a country clarify those differences and set out clear procedures and laws to guide our practice. You have children who are in school, or young persons who are in school, but have attained the age of 18. And they may have done so because of the fact that they were born early in the year, and they may have written common entrance, say, at 13. And they are in Form 5, but they are 18. And based on our laws, they are adults. If you may, for example, have a case where you need parental intervention, a child may decide not to come to school, or in that case, not a child, the student may decide that they want access to their results. And the school may say, or may have certain, requirements. And parents may not be able to access or to view the results of an 18-year-old because you're an adult. Yet you are under someone's roof and you go to school. The issue of sexual consent, we have cases where the schools have been faced with reports about, from parents, from students, from the counselors, about cases of sexual impropriety or sexual misconduct or violation of children. And when you face the Department of Human Relations, your hands are tied, because when it comes to the criminal code and the other laws, while the child is at school but the child is 16, the child is considered under 18 and not an adult, doesn't have an NIC number, cannot make certain decisions, cannot vote, cannot work. But, I mean, how much sense does it make that you can't do all those things, but you can consent to a sexual relationship? And so some of the implications of this type of legislation can augur well in terms of the way we synchronize our laws and allow for the justice system to work. Because many times you have situations where you want to help a family, you want to relieve a child or a young person from a situation, but because of the conflicting laws and the conflicts that exist in the legislation, your hands are tied. So I believe that it will help. I can see how this type of legislation, it may at a later stage require some reviewing, because there still is, there still is room for that. But critical to note is the issue of the consent, sexual relations consent, being moved from 16 to 18. I think if you're an adult, you're an adult. And if you have the authority to do adult things, you should be able to do everything that adults can do when you're an adult. And the definition of an adult has to have some legal background or backing. You can't be an adult in one context and not be an adult in a different context. If you're an adult, you're an adult. I also think it will guide our businesses as well in terms of employment. We have issues where people have actually challenged child labor because of the age of children or young people who are at work. So Arthur Lewis is a case in point where students who are part of some of the departments have turned 18, and they are, they're having difficulties dealing with some of the issues that conflict with their age. So this type of legislation is enlightening and also heartening. So as we pass this, I hope that we will continue to examine other laws that relate to children. The same document that the minister referred to, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, there is a section, Article 29, that specifically refers to certain procedures and practices, rights that children have in relating to the education system, issues that relate to non-discrimination and equity in access and so on, which I think we need to take very seriously. In many cases, we have had issues where children have been discriminated against, and in some cases, it's because the laws and the guidelines are not clear. And I think this piece of legislation can help to alleviate some of those issues. So I think it's welcome, and I hope that as we go forward, we continue to review our laws and be consistent in what we do. Thank you, Madam President.
Leader of Opposition Business.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Of course, let me add my voice to this very important piece of legislation, Madam President. And my contribution to it is from the perspective of our family laws. I know on our books today we still, in fact, I did ask our distinguished legal professional during lunch as to what extent that this piece of legislation probably affect what is on our books as our family laws. And he said to me, it doesn't affect our family laws. So we still have our 1950 family laws on our books, Madam President, that has implications for our families and how children are in our families. For example, we know that we still have the legitimate and illegitimate child. And our family courts children who, if the child is in, as the father and the mother not married, that child gets support of $200, as against the child of a married relationship gets more. We still have the father in the 1950 family laws that is not considered, if you're not married, as a father who is married. In fact, he's the assumed father. He's the putative father on our books. And even in the case of a marriage, the father is really, the child is really a child of the marriage. And all that gives rise in terms of how our children are. And it is Mandela who said, the true character of a society is revealed in how it treats its children. And as we reflect on, or we pass this piece of legislation dealing with the care and protection of our children, I think it was in 2015 that we did a mapping of the well-being of our children in St. Lucia. And the exercise was conducted by UNICEF to look at the well-being in terms of material, health, education. And the aspect that really struck me, Madam President, in some of that data is that single parents, children in single parents' household, were disadvantaged in terms of the well-being as it relates to education. They are disadvantaged as it relates to access to information. And also what was important is that where you had male-headed households, children, there was a greater percentage of children having access to information and attending early childhood education than female-headed households. What it means is that female-headed households had less money and sometimes had more children to deal with. And when you take all of this into consideration and we're looking at our care and protection laws that is now coming before us, I see there's a need for a lot of support. It calls for a lot of support. One, the institutional support needs to be there. Our family laws, we need to look at our family laws. I think it's time that we have technology to do the DNA testing to find out whether the child is really belongs to the father. And I think we have that information now. So it's no longer time when you are the assumed father or the child is just a child of the marriage. And therefore the support from fathers to the child well-being, that we must look to improve on it. But also where children are disadvantaged because the mother is not well and the father is seeking custody, the law should allow for this to happen with ease. So far on the 1950 laws, even if the child is not doing well because the child is in the care of a mother who is not able to do well, it is difficult for the father to seek custody of the child based on our current family laws. You know, and the whole issue of bata legitimate or legitimate, illegitimate, I just cannot wrap my head around that sort of situation in 2018 when we're thinking of the well-being of our children. And finally, Madam President, the issue of support, custody of kids, it's a very serious issue. And I think it's a major challenge for the government, for a state as we embark on this. This is not easy because in the past, Madam President, I've been associated with the family courts. And even when children are placed in the care of the state, there are times when the magistrate want to remove the child from the state and place the child back in the home where, you know, because it's not always well at our institutions. So as we embark on this, it means we need to invest in ensuring that when we want to remove a child in an area where the child is being hurt one way or the other, that we are not exposing the child to something worse. Some years ago, we had to invest and build an annex next to the boys training center so that we could separate the children who are there for care and protection as against those who have issues with the law. Madam President, they were all mixed up. And when you have young children who are involved with criminal activity and then a child who probably was being kidnapped by the parent and then the state had to secure that child, you either place the child at the police station or you put the child at the boys training center. And if you place the child at the boys training center, what the child is exposed to within a week, 2 weeks, probably that's not what you're looking for. So the issue of our protection and adoption bill is important. But the first thing that struck me even while I reflected on this coming into this parliament, Madam President, is that we need to also create an atmosphere of caring for children. Because it doesn't matter what amount of laws that we have on our books. If we are not a caring society, Madam President, it will not work. And recently I was in cul-de-sac speaking to the young sports club troopers. And they were handing them some medals. And I told the young men, what I would like in return from them receiving the medals is that when they're walking down the street, if they're about to say something that that the children are not supposed to hear, refrain from saying it. If you see a child and you're smoking, you know, that sort of, if we can create a society where we can respect our children, if we have a culture of wanting to save our children, then this can work because there are homes that can adopt children, but we do not have a culture where we care so much for our children. Madam President, there was a home that got burned some years ago in Mondidor, and there were about 7 children in the house. And it was another, you know, lady with a small building that took. And I'm sure that there were homes, and I looked at it and I said, therefore, when there to help, and I said, boy, how hard a society we are. There are homes that can afford to assist, but most times we don't. And an adoption bill, a care and protection bill is good. But having a caring culture and having a society that understands that if we care for our children, we care for the future is even more important. And therefore, I support this bill. But in moving it forward, I think we need to ensure that the Boys Training Center, we need to invest and make it a place that a child wants to spend some time there. You know, it cannot be looking like a prison cell. And the girls who are the Uptown Girls Training Center, we need to send monies there. Too often, Madam President, they need to beg SSDF for sanitary napkins and these sort of things, you know. So we really need to embark on that sort of journey. And I suspect, Madam President, if we can get 10% of this, it could transform our society. Because when you get to the other part of your bill where we talk about child justice, I was saying that we should not get to that point. We should avoid getting to that point if we invest in caring for our children at a very early age, you know, at a very early age. Thank you very much for the presentation, Chief. But like I said, we all need to get on board in the entire society. Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Minister.
Honorable Minister for Health and Wellness.
Well said. Well said.
Thank you, Madam President. I too would like to lend my voice to those before me who have gone on to congratulate the West Indies women's cricket team, and I emphasize the word women cricket team. I do not know if I should say that the men should take a page, but I'll wait until I get home tonight. I'll wait until I get home tonight to get the score of this afternoon's game that is ongoing right now, to know whether I should say that, so I'll hold it back for now. Madam President, it is really an honor and a privilege to be part of this historic moment that is happening right here. We have waited for this bill for a very long, long time. And I stand, of course, in total support of this bill, which is geared to providing additional protection for our children. For too long now, Madam President, when a child is in care and protection, and that child reaches the age of 16, then nobody knows what to do with this child. Most cases, the child does not have a place to return to, and this is why the child is in care and protection in the first place. And I'm referring more to girls than boys, because of course we have Boys Training Center. And even there, when the child reaches the age of 16, usually we wouldn't know what to do with the child, even the Human Services Department and so on. So now this bill, sometimes the child has nowhere to turn, nobody to go back to, and is left to the mercies of anybody. So this bill is actually extending that tragedy by 2 years. So within that time, of course, the child continues to grow, and hopefully by the age of 18, most people can get a job. So if worse comes to worse, the child can become employed. The young person can become employed at that age. There is no blurred area between the age of 16 and the age of 18, which existed before. So this bill is really clearing up a gap that existed for us before. I just want to reflect a little, Madam President, if you will allow me, on the sitting prior to this one, where the lower house was supposed to deliberate on these two bills, and the Child Care Protection and Adoption Bill and the Child Justice Bill. And we had an incident in the cul-de-sac area where we lost 2 children and an adult on the very same day that they were supposed to deliberate on these bills. And it so happened that they had to postpone presenting this bill to the House. And I do not know if it is divine intervention, because some people say or believe that when souls are taken so young, they reincarnate, and of course, because they go to a better resting place than where we are here, they come back as good souls. And therefore, the 2 innocent souls that were lost on that day, the bill didn't pass. But on the 20th of November, the last sitting of the lower house, which was International Children's Day, provided the opportunity to pass these 2 bills. And I'm saying to myself, was that divine intervention? Was that deliberate? On that day, we were able to pass these 2 bills that have something to do with children, care and protection for children, and International Children's Day. Why is it that that accident took place at the same time that those bills were supposed to be presented? And it happened that it shifted the presentation to International Children's Day. So I believe that is instructive, Madam President. I believe in faith, and therefore I believe that there is a message in that. And of course, my government, it is not just to say people talk about these issues. They make noise about the issues. Sometimes they march about it, violence against women, children when, they get into trouble, and so on. But my government actually takes steps to put the necessary legislation in place so that we can take care of our children. And that, to me, is extremely important. Oftentimes, we get caught up in the noise, and we tend to lose sight of what is important, the important issues, such as, like I said, child care and protection, violence against women, and the list of social ills, Madam President, goes on. And we hardly do anything substantial to bring about the necessary changes. So this bill is bringing about real change, change that we can fall back on to protect children and to help them grow and have better lives. I look at page 19 of the legislation, and well, I would like to go to page 17 first, Madam President, where it defines who is a child. And we need to let our society know that very loud and clear. A child means a person who is under the age of 18 years. Prior to now, it was 16 years, so now it is 18 years. And we need everyone to pay attention and be very mindful of that, because there are certain things that we cannot do to children. And now, Madam President, you know that we have children who are having children at a very early age, 12 years old, 13 years old, and so on. So it is my hope that with this legislation, my government is going to continue to put the necessary structures in place so that we can implement the legislation fully and address those issues. Address the issues of people who go around having sex with minors, causing them to have children at a very early age, and not having the support, the social support, and the family support to take care of these children that are having children. I look forward to the day, Madam President, when we have a social system that can ensure that these things do not happen in our society. The legislation goes on to define domestic violence, and domestic violence means an act of violence, whether physical, emotional, or verbal abuse perpetrated by a member of a household, and by that I understand it to mean a mother, a father, another child, on a member of the same household, which causes or is likely to cause physical, mental, or emotional injury or harm to the abused party or another member of the household. Madam President, we have cases of incest in our society, and many cases. And I want to send a loud message to these people that they should again read the definition in this legislation of domestic violence. I go on to page 19. Physical abuse. It means the intentional, non-accidental use of bodily force by a person aimed at hurting, causing bodily harm, or injury to a child. Madam President, I think of all the times when we inflict corporal punishment on our children. Some people say, spare the rod and spoil the child. I do not know where this originated from. Some people say it's the Bible. Yeah. Some say it is in poultry. Nevertheless, there is a debate about not only the origin, but also the interpretation of that sentence. For me, it is corporal punishment. And the law is clear right now what physical abuse is, as well as other abuses that I mentioned already before. I believe personally that it stems out of slavery. It is something that we learned and we passed it on. Because I know societies and cultures where people do not beat their children. Teachers do not beat in schools. They use other methods of punishment, and the children do not turn out any worse than our children that some of us beat to death. So I am saying here, this is a very serious issue for me. We have to learn, or maybe unlearn, not to beat our children. Children do not learn by you beating on them. Imagine you as an adult if somebody were to beat you. We don't want anybody touching us, hitting us, and so on. And you find even adults feel it is okay to hit each other. That cannot be right. And the legislation explains or gives a definition: physical abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, psychological abuse. It is all in there, especially when we are referring to children, our most vulnerable members of our society. We have to do everything that we can. If it is get counseling, we better do so that we can stop beating on our children. Because I know for a fact that that prevents them from learning. And there are other, of course, serious implications, health implications, etc. If I go to page 55, Madam President, and you see, I am so happy about this piece of legislation that I've read it over and over, and we have been rescheduling it for a while. So I've just been going through it, and every time I go through it, everything is just so good in there, you know? When you look at page 55, escape from a child care service, 55(1), A and B, then you have 2 and 3. For instance, a child run away from boys training center. We take this same child and bring this child back to the boys training center without any intervention at all. The police goes, finds him, and takes him back to boys training center. This legislation, 55(2), it says, if returning the child under subsection 1A is not in the best interest of the child, that is instructive. If it is not in the best interest of the child, the director may make an application to the court for variation of the care order. In making a determination under subsection 2, the director may interview the manager of the child care services. This is very important for me, Madam President, because sometimes the child is getting abused in the same institution that the child is being placed in for care and protection. In section 58D, Madam President, order for the provision of support services. When a child is being given support services, it says the views of the child in relation to the proposed order have been taken into account. So at every stage you see where the child, who is the subject, has to play a role. It is not just parents or adults in society imposing themselves on this child. The contribution order, now that's a very good one, Madam President. And I will say why I say it is very good. 62(1), if a child has been placed in a child care service, the court may make a contribution order compelling the parent of the child to contribute towards the maintenance of the child. Oftentimes, Madam President, a lot of people have children that they cannot provide for. If I cannot provide for myself in society, why would I want to go and have a child, bring a child into this world, an innocent child, and I cannot provide for this child? I am not going to say that we live in a perfect world where accidents don't happen, yes. But I believe that too many of us are too careless when it comes to bringing children into this world. Some parents use children as a bargaining chip. There's a breakup in the family. The mother holds on to the child even if she knows she cannot afford to, or the child can have a better life with the father. She holds on to the child as a bargaining chip against the father. Or the father withholds funds so that the mother can do whatever he wishes her to do. And if she doesn't, then he withholds funds away from that mother, depriving that child of a proper meal a day. I believe that this section, adults have to think long and hard about this section, because not only will the state have the authority to take away a child that you are not treating properly, but the state is going to be able to require that you make a contribution towards the upkeep of that child. Madam President, I know that it is late in the day, so I believe I am going to stop at this point to say that I am really very encouraged and excited about this piece of legislation because many of these children pass through my home, come through my door. And while I know that other people talk about society not being so kind, I believe that the buck stops with me. And if I can be an example to help these children and reach out to them, I believe that if a lot more of us in society do that, we will not have so many children, and I know it is so many children that go without a decent meal a day. Some of them cannot go to school. And if we would just reach out as adults and help these children, our society would be a much better place tomorrow. I thank you.
Senators, the question is that the Child Care Protection and Adoption Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to provide for the care, protection, and adoption of a child and for related matters.
Senators, we will be taking the bill in parts. Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 3.
Purpose.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Part 1, Clause 4 to 9.
Administration.
Part 1, Clause 4 to 9 stands part of the bill. Part 2, Clauses 10 to 23.
Request, report, investigation, and assessment.
Part 2, Clauses 10 to 23 stand part of the bill. Part 3, Clauses 24 to 55.
Care order.
Part 3, Clauses 24 to 55 stand part of the bill. Part 4, Clauses 56 to 65.
Other orders.
Part 4, Clauses 56 to 65 stand part of the bill. Part 5, Clauses 66 to 72.
Foster care.
Part 5, Clauses 66 to 72 stand part of the bill. Part 6, Clauses 73 to 118.
Adoption.
Part 6, Clauses 73 to 118 stand part of the bill. Part 7, Clauses 119 to 126.
Miscellaneous.
Part 7, Clauses 119 to 126 stand part of the bill. Schedule.
Section 78, oath of secrecy.
Schedule stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Senators, the question is that the committee rise and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Child Care Protection and Adoption Bill went through committee stage without amendment. Honorable Minister for Home Affairs, Justice, National Security.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Child Care Protection and Adoption Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the Child Care Protection and Adoption Act 2018.
Honorable Minister for Home Affairs, Justice and National Security.
Madam President, I beg to move the reading of a bill shortly entitled Child Justice.
Child Justice.
Honorable Minister for Home Affairs, Justice and National Security.
Madam President, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order number 49-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Minister of Home Affairs, Justice and National Security to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Proceed, Honorable Minister for Home Affairs, Justice and National Security.
Madam President, I beg to move the second reading of a bill shortly entitled Child Justice. The objective of this bill, Madam President, is to establish a criminal justice process for children accused of committing offenses that aims at protecting the rights of children as provided for in international instruments. 2, to provide for the minimum age of criminal responsibility of a child, and it is stated in the Act as 12 years. And legal scholars would say a child under the age of 12 years is dolly incapax, actually meaning the child is incapable of committing crime. It also states that children between the ages of 12 and 16, before a charge of a criminal offense or matter be preferred against that individual, a mental health status must be taken and produced. We also have to dig into the background of the child to find out whether there was any physical abuse, mental, psychological, physical, before bringing the child to a court of law. Also to incorporate diversion of children away from the formal court procedures. To establish a procedure for the assessment of children and initial inquiry as compulsory procedures. I'd like to explain this. Before, as soon as a child had committed an offense, report was made and the police would move in, arrest that child, charge, and then take him to court. Sometimes we would even take the opportunity of bringing that child to the criminal court, to any criminal court where adults are. And with this bill, that has ceased to function, that we will now be forced and to make sure to ensure that the children are tried in a family court and to extend sentencing options available in respect of children, so that if a child is charged jointly with an adult, that child will not be tried in the same court with the adult. The child will be tried in the family court, and the individual will go to the normal procedure of going to the criminal court. At this stage, I must say that I listened to the lower house, and one of the members opposite actually said that that we must try persons in family court, and I think he made a mistake. And so right now, I just want to reiterate that all trials of children will be held in a family court, and we do have a dedicated family court presently. The legislation clearly identifies the probation and parole services unit or role in dealing with children in conflict with the law. Before, like I said, it was directly involved with the police. The police was only punitive. That's all we were trained to do, and that was what the police were doing. Now, persons are going to be trained, probation and parole services. The number of parole officers, number of probation officers will be increased to deal with those children before an assessment made, and they will be dealt with by that entity before they can be brought to court. The main efforts of the legislation is an assessment diversion and a reintegration of child offenders. So we would have to be more creative in finding ways and means of having children to do certain things like extracurricular activities, get involved in club activities, get involved in music, get in sports, instead of sending those individuals to places like the bodily correctional facility. The Child Justice Bill also now imposes on the minister to find a place or to deem a place for a child between the age of 16 and 18. At present, there isn't any area where that child can be housed, so invariably that child has to go to bodily. And I don't think that is the right place for a child. So it now puts some pressure on the government and the minister to find an adequate place to put that child. We must focus on restorative practices with youth offenders, especially equally taking responsibility for actions. And so they must understand that they have run foul of the law and that they must take responsibility for the action. Overall, the legislation is more child-centered, with the child being critical in the overall processes that are going to be done. Again, I must make mention of the Honorable Kenny D. Anthony, when he talked about going through the bill and not realizing that there is a section where senior individuals, adults, use children to commit crime. And there isn't anything there to indicate what would happen to that particular child or how do we deal with that child. And I think it's a valid point that if we do find evidence and information that that child is really being used by an adult, then we need to be able to take action against that adult and use the child in a way that would give the evidence but not expose that child to any more danger by confronting that particular individual. So I think it is a good point on his part, and I accept it. And I do hope that as we go along, like the leader of opposition business has said, that we look at our reforms as we go along and see how we can make it stronger. In essence, this is what the Child Justice Bill will do. We have schools which are closing because of the number of children that we have. And we have teachers who will not be able to work. And I think the Child Justice Bill will be able to use some of those teachers in the probation and parole departments. So, and I think the teachers will be able to do a very good job in making sure that those children change their ways. So I think it was time that we passed this Child Justice Bill. And as we noticed that we have done it together with the Child Care Protection and Adoption Bill. it interchanges as you see. So I would like to thank the members on the other side for the valuable contribution that they have made so far. And I do hope that we agree to pass this child justice bill. Thank you.
Senators, the question is that the child justice bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to establish a judicial process for a child in conflict with the law to protect the rights of a child and for related matters.
Senators will be taking the bill in parts. Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 3.
Application.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 4.
Purpose.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 5. Part 1, Clause 5.
Criminal responsibility.
Part 1, Clause 5 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Part 2, Clauses 6 to 7.
Place of assessment and secure residential facility.
Part 2, Clauses 6 to 7 stand part of the bill.
Aye.
Part 3, Clauses 8 to 22.
Methods of securing attendance of child at initial inquiry.
Part 3, Clauses 8 to 22 stand part of the bill.
Aye.
Part 4, Clauses 23 to 26.
Assessment of child.
Part 4, Clauses 23 to 26 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Part 5, Clauses 27 to 37.
Initial inquiry.
Part 5, Clauses 27 to 37 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Part 6, Clauses 38 to 70.
Court proceedings.
Part 6, Clauses 38 to 70 stands part of the bill. Part 7, Clauses 71 to 76.
Diversion.
Part 7, Clauses 71 to 76 stands part of the bill. Part 8, Clauses 77 to 81.
Miscellaneous.
Part 7, Clauses 77 to 81 stand part of the bill. Schedule 1.
Offenses for which child may not be apprehended and be released.
Schedule 1 stands part of the bill. Schedule 2.
Offenses for which child may be released from police custody.
Schedule 2 stands part of the bill. Schedule 3.
Offenses for which a child may not be released from police custody.
Schedule 3 stands part of the bill. Schedule 4.
Levels of diversion options.
Schedule 4 stands part of the bill. Schedule 5.
Offenses for which diversion options apply.
Schedule 5 stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Senators, the question is that the committee rise and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Child Justice Bill went through committee stage without amendment. Honorable Minister for Home Affairs, Justice and National Security.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Child Justice Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye.
Aye.
As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the Child Justice Act 2018.
Senators, again, I thank you for assembling on time this morning and trust that we will be as punctual at our next sitting. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the Senate stand adjourned. Sine die.
Senators, the question is that this Senate do stand adjourned sine die. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Sitting adjourned.
All right.